Analog presents Visions of the Future with Isaac Asimov. The line between science fiction and true science is often thin and sometimes difficult to define. Yet there is a line between fiction and science. It is as fine and clear as the boundaries separating the Cretaceous from the Tertiary, the age of dinosaurs from the age of mammals. The only difference is that our boundary is constantly moving as science redefines science fiction. The dreams of just a few years ago are today's commonplace events. It is this boundary that was the lifelong fascination of Isaac Asimov. The mission of this video series is to examine that boundary, that moving target. Isaac Asimov launched this video project 2 years before his death. It synthesizes his visionary concepts with his scientific roots. This first volume contains the highlights of his last major interview and serves as both a mission statement and a tribute to one of the greatest science and science fiction writers ever known. Isaac Asimov, born January 2nd, 1920, died April 6th, 1992. 7 decades of brilliant wit, scientific insight, futuristic understanding, and absolute clarity. Isaac Asimov's literary output alone embodied over 500 volumes, including science, science fiction, mystery stories, limericks, history and humor, even guides to the Bible, Shakespeare, and Gilbert and Sullivan. Winner of numerous awards for both nonfiction and science fiction writing, Asimov was best known as the great explainer of science. His knack for making the complicated simple, the confusing clear, and the mundane exciting will never be equaled. In his lifetime, he entertained millions, but more importantly, he enlightened everyone about the world in which they lived. Blessed with total recall, Asimov became an encyclopedia of scientific information. Thousands of admiring fans wrote him each year, including young scientists and writers seeking his opinion and expertise. He responded to all inquiries. Martin Greenberg, Asimov's close friend and collaborator, confided that with all the letters written to Asimov each year, he kept only 3. These 3 letters speak volumes for the diversity of his readers and admirers. A letter from Dwight D. Eisenhower, one from Orson Welles, and the one that probably meant the most to Asimov, from Tommy Smothers. Born the son of poor, hard-working Russian immigrants, Asimov spent long hours as a child diligently working in his father's Brooklyn, New York, candy store. That work ethic imprinted on his young mind. As an adult, Asimov continued to write 10 to 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. When forced to stop for a brief time, a tiny voice within would implore, "Who's watching the store?" And the writing continued. But it wasn't really work to Asimov. Writing was his love and joy. Words flowed from his mouth with ease and clarity. No pain, no blocks, no anguish, just pure joy. When asked by Barbara Walters, "What would you do if you only had 6 months to live?" Asimov replied, "I'd type faster." A self-confessed genius, Asimov taught himself to read at age 5 and graduated from high school at age 15. He earned his Bachelor of Science degree and a PhD in chemistry. Soon after, he received his appointment as an instructor in biochemistry at Boston University School of Medicine, even though he had no formal courses in biochemistry, a fact that somehow eluded the university. No matter, his classes were the most popular on campus. But it was as a young boy working in his father's store that Asimov first discovered his love of writing and science. The arrival of 3 science fiction magazines, Amazing, Science Wonder Stories, and Astounding, caught the attention of his keen, inquisitive eye. With the help and tutorage of Astounding's editor, John W. Campbell, Asimov's fame as a science fiction writer was assured by age 22. Among his accomplishments, Asimov virtually created the field of fictional psychohistory with his immensely popular Foundation series. And he actually coined the term robotics with his classic I, Robot. One of the world's most prolific writers and the best-known modern science fiction author, Asimov's mark in science fiction history is firmly etched with such works as Pebble in the Sky, The Currents of Space, The Caves of Steel, The Gods Themselves, Foundation's Edge, and The Bicentennial Man. Yet with his incredible sense of clarity, Asimov was also able to bridge the gap into non-fiction science writing. A fascinating book on elements, Building Blocks of the Universe, and another on blood chemistry, The Living River, are but two of his award-winning non-fiction writings. In the end, illness and medication prevented Isaac Asimov from doing what he lived to do, write. And when he could no longer write, he died. Asimov once described himself as being, in an ascending order of importance, a scientist, a science writer, a science fiction writer, and the world's greatest lover. We think he'd like to be remembered that way. Join us now as we roam the universe through the incredible mind of one of our true national treasures, scientific visionary, Isaac Asimov.
My name is Isaac Asimov. I'm editorial director of Isaac Asimov Science Fiction magazine, and I've been involved with science fiction all my life practically. And the problem is, how do you differentiate between science fiction and science? And the answer is that it's very difficult to do so, because not only is the boundary fuzzy, but it changes all the time, and very rapidly sometimes, usually in the direction of science. And in this series of programs, what we're interested in is considering the immediate future, where we are going, and how it's going to affect us. Now, even the most ethereal advances have this habit of affecting us. For instance, so we do send out rockets into space. Some people might think it's only a scientific boondoggle. How is it going to affect us here on Earth? Well, stop and think a moment. Communication satellites mean that we can communicate all over the world instantaneously. Television is now distance insensitive, because any television waves can go to a satellite and be reflected to some other point on Earth. As a result, anyone on Earth with a television set can see what's happening anywhere else on Earth. It has made our planet so much smaller. It has introduced us to the notion of globalism in a way that makes it practical. You couldn't have this sort of thing without the technological advances of the last few decades. And it may point the way to a future in which we can survive, simply because more and more we are thinking of ourselves as a planetary people. More and more we are thinking of the Earth as a small object, and therefore we can work better on the problems that face us all, that are global in nature. In other words, all this, quote, science fictional, unquote, stuff about space travel has utterly changed our planet and ourselves, our way of looking at the world, looking at each other. And this is true in almost every other field, if not in quite every other field, of scientific endeavor. The advance of computers, for instance, the advance of new medical techniques, the recent discoveries in superconductivity. All these things are not just a matter of scientific curiosity, although that is frequently what drives scientists, but it also has all the opportunity of changing our lives. We have new medical techniques which can perhaps control human evolution. We can, instead of waiting for the hit and miss of ordinary evolution, have designed human beings. Now, this can be technologically possible, and yet there may be social